Alright, so at home, I have a list of all the projects that we're going to hopefully build in the future. Now, when I'm going to ask Dad on what he wants to build next, some of the stuff I ask him doesn't fancy his taste.
The other day, Andy shared what he wanted to build, and I thought it was crap. I'm not going to build that. Of course.
I'll make sure you build it.
Why? I said that it forced me to come up with something that interested. The project that I thought of the other day is a jewelry box. Andy's excited about it, and he's actually holding a prototype of the locking mechanism. So if you hang on and stay tuned, you'll see how this thing works.
Before we started building, Dad had to sketch out a rough blueprint for how the jewelry box was going to look. Once we did that, we cut out all the pieces for our frame out of the 3/8 plywood, which has been very hard to nail into in our past videos.
You know what? I should let him nail and just sit back and laugh.
I get the rest of your coffee if I don't miss.
I'm gonna have all my coffee then. Okay.
No sabotaging.
This is gonna be good.
Come on! So now we are waiting for our compressor to kick back on. Cue waiting music. It's clean. It's clean. It didn't go through.
Oh yeah, you can see it there.
Oh no! Nice try. We don't count those, and you know it. Needless to say, shooting nails into 3/8 plywood is really tough. So if you have a vise, try and put whatever you're trying to shoot nails into that vise, lock it tight, and then try your best not to miss. After we clamped our box together, we had to take the measurements of our drawers and then sketch them onto our blueprint so that we would know what cuts to make on which pieces on the table saw. If you're going to make several drawers at a time like we did here, it's important to make sure that you mark all of your pieces. This way you don't make wrong cuts or mix up pieces or do anything else that'll hinder your progress. As you can see here, not all of our boxes fit in right, so there was some additional trimming that was required. Yeah,
I like that. All right.
As with any piece of furniture, you want to make sure that the whole thing is square, especially drawers. If they're not square, they're not going to fit into their slots. So for this job, all we used was a ruler to make sure all the sides of the boxes lined up correctly before we finished nailing them. After we finished sanding some of the drawers, we took some wood filler and went over some of the holes that were on the front of the drawers. Even though it looks pink, it dried to a nice tan color that matched the paneling really well. Then we found the center of each drawer so that we could attach a small 1-inch dowel to the front to act as a handle. Once all the wood filler had dried, I came back with a detail sander to make the whole front nice and smooth. Okay, so for this next part, Dad has tried to explain to me how the secret compartment is going to work many times already, and I still don't understand. So he's going to try and explain it to you guys. Take it away.
We're going to create a secret compartment by building a framing around our jewelry box. In building the locking mechanisms, they're going to be hidden inside here. I cut down a bolt and made a slide. In order for that to come out of there, you're going to have to use a magnet. We got some 3/16 veneer that we're going to slide in between here, and I'm not going to tell you anymore because it's too hard to explain.
So this is where things start to get complicated. Essentially, there's going to be 4 posts on each corner of the jewelry box that's made out of a ripped 2x4 just like you see us making here. Once we had our posts, we took them to the drill press to put 2 holes in the top. One for the screw and one for the metal glide that would act as the locking mechanism. Next, we had to prep our table saw for cutting dados. With the amount of dados that we were going to put on all of these posts, we had to make sure to mark them all properly. Otherwise, we would have messed up the cuts and the grooves would have been on the wrong sides or on the wrong pieces, and the whole project would have been messed up. Each post got about 3 to 5 grooves. Some of them were for decoration, but others have a function, as you'll see here in a moment. Make sure that when you're cutting them, you leave enough space between each corner piece. Otherwise, it'll crack out just like it did there. Boy! At this point, some of you might be wondering why we needed a screw in the top of our post. We need it there because we need a pivot point which is going to turn these little blocks that Dad has cut off from the ripped 2x4s. Those are going to be our spinning locks. Here, all Dad is doing is making the pilot holes a little bigger so that they'll accept the screw. Once we had all our pivot points cut off, we had to go back to the table saw to open up some of the dados that we had placed earlier. We needed them bigger so that they would accept the thicker paneling that was going to slide through them. Okay, so after that stint of me basically doing nothing but watch Dad and eat potato chips, it's finally time to attach our pivot points. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and glue them like usual, but what we're going to try and do is shoot the nails on an angle because we don't have any that will perfectly fit the depth of this ripped 2x4 and this paneling. So we're going to have to try and shoot them on an angle so they don't come through on the inside. Surprisingly enough, shooting our 1.5 inch nails on an angle through these two pieces worked really well. We only had 1 or 2 nails that actually popped through on the inside. And while we didn't show it here, the piece that Dad is holding is actually a decorative piece that's going to go on each side of our jewelry box. They're both going to act as the resting places for our secret sliding panels. As with most 4-legged furniture, ours was a little bit unstable when you would set it down, so Dad just took it to the belt sander to level out all the legs. For our secret panels, we went with a piece of 3/16 inch birch plywood because it was pliable enough to fit into our slots. Hopefully you guys are starting to understand how this thing is going to work. I know I am. How it works is all these panels lap over each other. And what you're going to have to do is there's going to be those blocks. They're going to sit right on top of here, and you're going to have to turn them so that this can finally come out. This can then, oops, yeah, that's not how, oh my gosh. This can come out, and then this can come out. So we're going to start making some trim pieces to start covering some of these cracks and stuff. Another reason we added these trim pieces was so that when we go to pull the panels out, we have something to hold on to. Here, Dad is just chiseling out part of the trim so that when we put it on the paneling, it sticks and holds in a better fashion. Up until this point, the locking mechanisms that Dad has designed have been really just a prototype. The way that they're designed to work is we have these cylinders that were made out of just a regular old bolt, and we ground them down. They're going to sit inside these pockets, and they're going to keep this thing from spinning. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these templates that we're going to make, we're going to put them over here, so we're going to glue them on so that you can't see any of those screws or holes. You put a magnet over the top, and then you hear that, I don't know if you can hear that, there's a click. That allows this to spin and line up the grooves so that this can come all the way out. There's still a little kinks we got to work out, but that's the general idea. With this type of locking setup, it's extremely important to get the depth and the diameter of your holes right. If they're off by even just a little bit, your glides won't go up and down. The best ways that we found to get these two measurements right is to use a drill bit to get your depth right and some sandpaper to get your diameter right. If you don't have a Dremel, you can just stick some sandpaper in your drill like Dad did here. Make sure when you're putting your screws in that they're not too tight. This way your locks can have room to spin. Make sure that when you're putting the groove on your lock, that it's on the right side of the lock. Here in this clip, Dad's actually putting the groove on the wrong side of the lock. It should have been on the side here. So we had to come back later and fill this piece in with wood filler. You might see that later on in the video, but just make sure that you're putting it on the right side. To make the caps for the top of our locks, all we did was take the piece and trace it out on our 3/16 inch plywood. Then we took it to the bandsaw and cut around all our lines. Now usually before we start wood burning, we take a pencil and draw out some designs on our piece of furniture. But here there were just so many dados and straight lines for us to go around that we just decided to use the stylus on those areas. They really helped with concealing some of our errors and frayed edges of the dados. When you put on the caps to your locks, make sure that you use a very light layer of glue and stay away from your glide hole and your screw. To finish off our project, all we used was clear polyurethane to give it a nice glossy look. One thing we forgot to mention was that the wood that we used for our caps was actually made out of our 3/8 plywood. All we did was rip it down the middle so we could get the thin veneer off the top.
Let's go.
If you're wondering why we use so many magnets, it's because some of the polyurethane that we used managed to get into the crevices that contained our glides. If you're going to do this project for yourself, you might want to consider a less sticky alternative to finishing your project. You may notice that some of these panels appear hard to get out. That's because we had to make sure that the grooves and the panels had a perfect combination of tightness and looseness. If they're too tight, you won't be able to get them out. If they're too loose, they'll all shake when you pick up the box, completely giving your hiding spots away.
So as usual, it's time for our awkward outro. Yeah, we were just really happy with how this project turned out. The only thing we would have done differently is make the gap between these two dados on the corner pieces a little bit wider, because we had the problem of them chipping out and just falling off. So, and actually what Dad's pointed at here is we actually snapped off all the corners on purpose because we kept doing it on accident. So it looks a lot more symmetrical when we snapped them off and looks more decorative. But
We had to glue a few back on too down here and around.
yeah,
But
and marking your pieces is critical because we did make a couple cuts that weren't where they were supposed to be.
yeah.
But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you want to share this video with your friends, feel free to do so. Subscribe if you want to see more weekly content. Smash the like button, you know, all that YouTuber stuff that they always ask you to do at the end of the video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Bye.